In suburban Atlanta, a marketing executive was about to shatter her perfect life. What started as a casual ancestry DNA test took a shocking turn when she came face to face with an impossible genetic match. Lila Rivera wasn't your typical corporate wife. For 32 years, she had questioned her absent father, known for her methodical intelligence and fierce independence. When she discovered Marcus Whitman, her husband, shared 50% of her DNA, she had no idea she was walking into decades of family crimes. Lila's investigation would expose one of Atlanta's most respected judges as a serial predator, destroying her marriage but freeing countless victims who had been silenced for 30 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The notification chimed softly on Lila Rivera's laptop. 8:47 p.m. Marcus still out at poker night. She'd planned to finish her quarterly marketing reports, but the email's subject line froze her fingers above the trackpad. Your ancestry DNA results are ready. 3 months ago, she'd ordered the kit impulsively, driven by lifelong questions about her absent father. The same restless curiosity that surfaced every Father's Day, every gathering where Marcus effortlessly shared Whitman family stories, while she offered only fragments about her mother's side. The website loaded with cheerful graphics promising to unlock your family's story. The ethnicity breakdown appeared first. Spanish, Mexican, traces of Irish and German. Nothing surprising, but as she scrolled to the DNA matches section, her breath caught. At the top, labeled Close Family, was a match showing 50% shared DNA. The name beside it, Marcus Daniel Whitman, her husband's name, his LinkedIn photo. Below it, in clinical text, predicted relationship, parent-child, or full sibling. The coffee mug slipped from her nerveless fingers, crashing against the hardwood. Hot liquid splashed her feet, but she barely noticed. Her mind grasped for any explanation that didn't involve the impossible. A mistake, it had to be. With shaking hands, she clicked Marcus's profile. The system had connected their accounts automatically. They joked about it when she mentioned the test. Marcus had said he might order one too, since his family history seemed sparse
For such a prominent Atlanta family. But he'd never followed through, or so she'd thought. The profile showed he'd submitted his sample 2 weeks after hers. Parent/child, full sibling. The clinical language couldn't soften the horrifying implications. She and Marcus shared 50% of their DNA. They shared a parent. Her analytical mind, the same thinking that made her excel in market research, worked through possibilities. Both mothers were alive. Victoria Whitman had welcomed Lila with cautious warmth. Her own mother, Carmen Rivera, had raised her alone after Lila's father disappeared. The father she'd never known. The father whose absence had shaped every relationship, including her cautious trust in Marcus's patient courtship. She opened a new tab, navigating to the Whitman family's online presence. Judge Robert Whitman's career was well documented. 30 years on the bench, community awards, Atlanta Society pillar. The timeline fit. 35 years ago, when Lila was conceived, Robert would have been a young prosecutor. She scrolled through newspaper articles, society photos, searching for anything placing Robert in her mother's orbit decades ago. There, a 1989 legal aid charity event photo. Robert Whitman, then assistant DA, beside volunteers. In the background, nearly invisible, a young woman who resembled Carmen Rivera. Lila's hands trembled as she zoomed in. The woman's face was partially obscured, but the bone structure, the posture, it could have been her mother. The caption named only prominent attorneys. She clicked back to the DNA results, hoping they'd changed, but Marcus's name remained at the top, an unavoidable truth. They weren't just married, they were siblings. The implications crashed over her. Every intimate moment of their 5-year marriage felt contaminated. Every family dinner with the Whitmans took on sinister meaning. Had Robert known? Had he recognized her mother's features in Lila's face and said nothing? Had he watched them fall in love, marry, all while knowing? Her phone buzzed. Down $200, but having fun. Home by 10. Love you. The casual affection made her nauseous. How many times had they said those words? How often had she felt grateful for finding someone to heal her abandonment wounds? Marcus had been patient with her trust issues, understanding about her independence, supportive of her ambitions. He'd been perfect. And now she understood why. They shared genetic predispositions, the same analytical mind, the same off-center humor. They shared the same father. Lila pushed back from her desk, coffee pooling around her feet. The house felt different, as if revelation had altered the air itself. Family photos lining the hallway mocked her. Wedding images surrounded by Whitmans who might have known all along. She remembered Victoria's odd looks, conversations stopping when she entered rooms, the curious absence of Marcus's baby photos. Details that seemed quirky now felt deliberately concealed. Her laptop chimed with more DNA matches, distant cousins, unknown relatives, but none mattered. Only one match counted, sitting atop her list like a digital sword. The front door clicked. Marcus's voice carried through the house. "Lila, you home?"
I saw your car, but the lights are off. His footsteps, the familiar sound of keys dropping in the kitchen bowl. In moments, he'd find her in the study, and she'd decide what to say. Whether to confront him with truth that would destroy both their lives, or swallow this knowledge and pretend their marriage wasn't built on an impossible foundation. Babe, you okay up there? Closer now, filled with casual concern. A loving husband. A loving brother. The distinction made her skin crawl. Lila stared at the screen, at undeniable evidence of their shared DNA. Whatever choice she made in the next minutes would define her life. The comfortable, suburban existence she'd built with Marcus, the carefully curated normalcy that finally made her feel safe, was about to shatter, like her coffee mug. She heard him climbing stairs, familiar footsteps approaching where her world had collapsed. No returning to the woman she'd been an hour ago, no reclaiming blissful ignorance of their Tuesday routine. The DNA didn't lie. Whatever came next, that truth would remain, waiting for her to speak it aloud or bury it forever. Marcus's hand brushed against her shoulder as he entered the study, and Lila flinched as if burned. The touch that had once brought comfort now felt like a violation, every nerve ending screaming with the knowledge she couldn't unknow. "Hey, what's wrong?" His voice carried genuine concern as he noticed the shattered coffee mug, the liquid pooled across the hardwood floor. "Did you hurt yourself?" She couldn't look at him, couldn't meet those familiar brown eyes that she now realized might mirror her own for reasons that made her stomach churn. Instead, she stared at the laptop screen, where their DNA match still glowed like an accusation. "Lila!" Marcus knelt beside her chair, his poker winnings forgotten. "Talk to me. What happened?" The gentleness in his voice, the same patience he'd shown during their courtship when her trust issues flared, now felt like mockery. How could he be so kind when their entire relationship was built on a lie, when their marriage was an abomination? The DNA test results came back. Her voice sounded foreign, hollow. Marcus followed her gaze to the screen, and she watched his face change as comprehension dawned. The color drained from his features, but not in the way she'd expected. Not with shock, with something that looked almost like resignation. "I can explain," he said quietly. The words hit her like a physical blow. "You knew. It wasn't a question. You fucking knew." "Not exactly. Don't lie to me." She spun her chair to face him, finally meeting his eyes. Not now. Not after this. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd always found endearing. Now it seemed calculating,
a tell he used when preparing to manipulate a situation. I suspected something wasn't right. About my family, I mean. There were always gaps. Gaps? Her voice rose, hysteria creeping in. We're siblings, Marcus. We share a father. That's not a gap. That's a fucking crater. He stood, pacing to the window that overlooked their carefully manicured suburban street. Their neighbors' houses glowed with warm light, families settling in for normal Tuesday evenings, families who weren't living in some twisted psychological thriller. My mother used to slip up sometimes, Marcus said, his back to her. Little things. She'd mention Dad being away more when I was born than when my older brother was, and there were no photos of me as a baby. None. She said they were lost in a flood, but we've never lived anywhere that flooded. Lila felt bile rise in her throat. So you thought what? That you might have a secret sibling somewhere and decided to marry her? No! He turned, his face stricken. I never imagined. When I met you, when we fell in love, I thought if there was any connection, it would be distant. Maybe a cousin. But then you mentioned taking the DNA test, and you took one too, to check. The betrayal cut deeper than the initial discovery. You suspected we might be related, and you married me anyway. I took the test to prove we weren't related. His voice broke. I was so sure the results would show we were fine, that my paranoia was just... But they didn't, did they? Lila stood, her legs unsteady. The results came back weeks ago, and you said nothing. You've known for weeks that we're siblings, and you said nothing. Marcus's silence was answer enough. She thought of the past few weeks, searching for signs she'd missed. Had he been different? Distant? No. If anything, he'd been more attentive, more loving, as if he was trying to make up for the secret eating him alive. My father, she said, the words tasting like poison. Robert Whitman is my biological father. Yes. The simple confirmation shattered something inside her. All those family dinners, sitting across from the man who'd abandoned her mother, who'd created her, and then walked away. Had he known? Had he looked at her face and seen his own features reflected back? Does he know? Marcus's hesitation told her everything. I think so. He's been different since you've been part of the family, watching you more carefully. And there was something he said once about how you reminded him of someone from his past. Someone from his past, Lila laughed, a broken sound. Is that what he calls the women he raped? Lila, that's not... Isn't it? She turned on him, fury replacing the numbness. My mother was 19 when I was born, 19 and working as a volunteer at legal aid events. Your father was a prosecutor with power and connections. You think she had a choice? Marcus flinched as if she'd struck him. You don't know what happened. I know enough. She gestured at the DNA results. I know your father destroyed my mother's life and then let us walk into his family like we belonged there. I know you suspected the truth and chose to protect him instead of me. I chose to protect us, Marcus said desperately. Our marriage, our life together. I thought if we just never knew for certain. You thought you could build a marriage on lies and somehow that would work? Lila's voice cracked. Every time we made love, every time you touched me, you were wondering if we shared the same father. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Marcus? Explain to me how this works in your mind. He sank into the chair across from her, looking suddenly older. I love you. That never changed, not even after I suspected. The thought of losing you, of destroying what we'd built. What we built was already destroyed. It was destroyed the moment your father assaulted my mother. It was destroyed the moment you chose to protect your family's reputation over the truth. The word reputation seemed to hit him like a physical blow. She watched his expression shift, saw the moment when the golden child conditioning kicked in, the lifelong programming that put the Whitman name above everything else.
If this comes out, he said slowly, it won't just destroy us. It'll destroy my family. My father's career, my mother's standing in the community, the charity work, the... Stop. The word came out as a whisper, but it cut through his rationalization like a blade. Just stop. She stared at the man she'd married, the man she'd loved, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not her soulmate, not her healing from childhood abandonment, but another Whitman, programmed from birth to protect the family legacy at any cost. You're choosing them. Right now, in this moment, you're choosing to protect your father over seeking justice for what he did to my mother, to me. That's not... Get out. Marcus froze. Lila, please. We can work through this. We can figure out how to... Get out of this room. Get out of this house. Her voice was steady now, cold with resolve. I need to think, and I can't do that with you here trying to manipulate me into keeping your family's secrets. This is my house, too. Then go to your mother's. Go explain to Victoria how her precious family reputation is about to crumble. Marcus stood slowly, his face cycling through emotions. Desperation, anger, resignation. If this comes out, you won't just... If this comes out, you will lose everything too. Your career, your social standing. People will never look at you the same way. Maybe that's what justice costs, Lila said. Maybe some things are worth losing everything for. The words hung between them, a final line drawn in their marriage. Marcus walked to the door, pausing at the threshold. I do love you, he said without turning around. I know, Lila replied, but you love your family more. His footsteps retreated down the stairs, followed by the sound of drawers opening in their bedroom, the rustle of clothes being packed. Within an hour, she heard his car pull out of the driveway, leaving her alone with the truth that would define the rest of her life. The house felt cavernous without Marcus, every sound echoing in the silence he'd left behind. Lila sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, a cold cup of coffee untouched beside her, watching the sun rise over suburban Atlanta through windows that Marcus had installed himself 2 summers ago. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life. She'd called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years, claiming food poisoning. It wasn't entirely a lie. The truth she'd discovered had poisoned everything, leaving her nauseated and hollow. But while her body felt weak, her mind was razor-sharp, focused on the methodical research that had always been her strength. Judge Robert Whitman's career sprawled across her screen in carefully curated detail. 30 years of public service, countless awards, a pillar of the legal community. But Lila had learned to read between the lines in her marketing career, to spot the gaps in narratives that brands tried to hide, and Robert Whitman's story had gaps. She pulled up court records, cross-referencing dates with news articles. There, a pattern emerging in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Several cases involving sexual assault charges against prominent men that had been mysteriously dropped or resulted in suspiciously light sentences. All during Robert's tenure as assistant district attorney, all cases he'd been involved with either as prosecutor or consultant. Her phone buzzed. Elena Vasquez, her best friend since college, texting about their usual Thursday lunch plans. Lila stared at the message, realizing she needed someone to talk to, someone outside the web of lies she'd been living in. 20 minutes later, Elena sat across from her in the same kitchen where Marcus had packed his things, her social worker's instincts already activated by Lila's haunted expression. Start from the beginning, Elena said, setting down her coffee with the careful attention of someone preparing for difficult news. Lila told her everything, The DNA test, the discovery, Marcus's confession, the horrible realization about Robert Whitman, Elena listened without interruption, her face growing graver with each revelation. Jesus, Lila. Elena's voice was soft when she finished. I'm so sorry. I don't need sympathy. I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Lila turned her laptop around, showing Elena the court records she'd compiled. Look at this pattern. Does this seem normal to you? Elena's trained eye scanned the documents, her expression shifting from concern to professional analysis. Years of working with trauma victims had taught her to recognize the institutional patterns that protected predators. This is textbook, Elena said grimly. Powerful men using their positions to manipulate the system. Look at these victim withdrawals. 3 women who initially pressed charges against different men, all cases Robert was involved with, all suddenly recanting their testimony.
Could be coincidence.
Could be, but in my experience,
Elena shook her head. Predators don't operate in isolation. They build networks, use their influence to protect each other, and they're very good at silencing victims.
Lila felt her stomach clench. You think he's done this before, not just to my mother?
I think your mother might have been one of many. Elena pulled up another document pointing to a dismissed case from 1988. Sarah Martinez, 22, accused her supervisor of assault. Case dropped when she suddenly left town. Want to guess who handled the prosecution?
Robert Whitman.
And look at this. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up financial records that were public domain. The Whitman Family Foundation. They make substantial donations to women's shelters, crisis centers, organizations that help assault victims.
That sounds charitable.
Or it sounds like hush money disguised as philanthropy. Elena's expression was grim. It's a classic tactic. Make donations to organizations that help your victims, create the appearance of caring about women's issues while systematically destroying women's lives.
The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Lila thought about the charity gala she'd attended with Marcus, standing beside Robert as he was celebrated for his contributions to women's causes. The bitter irony made her physically ill. How many victims do you think there are? Lila asked.
Based on what I'm seeing, potentially dozens over 3 decades. Elena leaned back, her face pale. Men like Robert don't usually stop. They escalate, they get bolder, especially when they feel protected by their position.
And the family knows.
The family has to know. You don't cover up this level of systemic abuse without coordination. Elena's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many families choose reputation over justice. Your husband knew, Lila. Maybe not everything, but he knew enough to suspect and chose silence. The finality of it hit her like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't just hidden the DNA results. He'd been complicit in protecting a predator, prioritizing family loyalty over the women his father had destroyed.
What do I do?
The question came out as a whisper. Elena reached across the table, covering Lila's hand with hers. That depends on what you can live with. You could walk away, divorce Marcus quietly, try to rebuild your life. No one would blame you.
But
there are other victims out there who never got justice. Women who were silenced, whose lives were destroyed to protect Robert Whitman's reputation. And there might be future victims if no one stops him. Lila stared out the window at the manicured neighborhood that had felt like safety just yesterday. Now it felt like a lie, another carefully constructed facade hiding ugly truths.
If I come forward, it won't just destroy Robert. It'll destroy Marcus, Victoria, potentially innocent people.
And if you don't come forward, Robert continues to get away with decades of abuse.
Elena's voice was gentle but firm. There's no clean choice here, Lila. There's only the choice you can live with. Lila thought about her mother, 19 and vulnerable, encountering a charismatic prosecutor at a charity event. Had Carmen tried to report what happened? Had she been silenced like the others, forced to raise her daughter alone while Robert Whitman built his prestigious career? I need to find the other victims, Lila said finally. I need to understand the full scope of what he's done. Elena nodded slowly. It won't be easy. These women have been trained to stay silent, probably threatened with legal retaliation if they speak out. And some of them might not want to relive their trauma. But some might. Some might be waiting for someone to believe them, to give them permission to speak. Maybe. Elena pulled out her phone. I know people in victim advocacy, social workers who've dealt with cases like this. If you're serious about this, I can make some calls, see if anyone recognizes patterns or has information about Robert Whitman. Lila felt something shift inside her, a resolve crystallizing from the chaos of the past 18 hours. Make the calls.
Are you sure? Once you start down this path, there's no going back. The Whitman family won't just let you destroy their legacy without fighting back.
They've already destroyed my life, Lila said, closing her laptop with decisive finality. Now it's time to return the favor. Outside, the suburban morning continued its peaceful routine. Neighbors heading to work, children waiting for school buses. But inside the house that once represented Lila's carefully constructed normalcy, a different kind of work was beginning. The methodical, dangerous work of seeking justice against people who'd spent decades perfecting the art of avoiding it. The coffee shop in Little Five Points buzzed with afternoon energy, but Maria Santos chose the corner table furthest from the windows, her back to the wall. Even 20 years later, she moved like someone who expected danger. Lila recognized the behavior. She'd seen it in her mother during her anxious periods, the hypervigilance that never quite faded. You said this was about court system reform. Maria's voice carried a slight tremor, her dark eyes constantly scanning the room. At 43, she looked older, stress lines etched deep around her eyes. In a way, Lila chose her words carefully. Elena's contacts had led her to Maria through a circuitous path. A former colleague who knew a social worker who remembered a court reporter who'd suddenly left her job in 1992. I'm researching patterns of behavior in the justice system, particularly how cases involving powerful defendants are handled. Maria's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I don't work in that field anymore. I know. You became a teacher. Lila had done her homework. Maria Santos, former court reporter, now taught third grade in Decatur. Never married, no children, lived alone in a small apartment.
A life carefully constructed to avoid attention. Elena Vasquez from Family Services suggested you might have insights about systemic issues. At Elena's name, Maria's posture relaxed slightly. Elena's reputation in Atlanta's social services community preceded her, a tireless advocate for the vulnerable. What kind of patterns are you looking for? Lila took a breath, knowing she was about to cross a line. Patterns involving Judge Robert Whitman. The effect was immediate. Maria's face went white, her hand shaking as she set down her cup. I don't discuss. I know what happened to you. The words hung in the air between them. Maria's eyes darted toward the exit, calculating distance, preparing to run. It was the same flight response Lila had seen in her mother whenever unexpected visitors came to their door. You don't know anything, Maria whispered. I know you were 23, working as a court reporter. I know you filed a complaint against Judge Whitman in October 1992. I know the complaint disappeared and you left Atlanta 2 weeks later. Maria's breathing became shallow, rapid. Lila recognized the signs of an approaching panic attack and shifted her approach, using the gentler tone Elena had taught her for dealing with trauma survivors. I'm not here to hurt you, Maria. I'm here because... She paused, weighing how much to reveal. Because I think he's my father? The admission seemed to short-circuit Maria's panic. She stared at Lila with new intensity, studying her features. You look like there's something familiar about your face. My mother is Carmen Rivera. She volunteered at legal aid events in the late 80s. Understanding dawned in Maria's eyes, followed by something that might have been recognition. Carmen! Jesus! I wondered what happened to her. You knew my mother? We worked some of the same events. She was so young, so eager to help. We lost touch after... Maria's voice trailed off, but her meaning was clear. They sat in silence, two women connected by the destructive wake of the same man's actions. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice barely audible. You're really his daughter? DNA confirmed it. I've been married to his son for 5 years.
The word still felt surreal. I had no idea until 3 days ago. Maria's expression shifted from fear to something closer to rage. They let you marry into that family, knowing what they know? They knew? Of course they knew. Maria's voice gained strength, decades of suppressed anger bleeding through. Victoria Whitman knew exactly what kind of man she was married to. She called me after I filed the complaint, offered me money to reconsider my accusations. The revelation hit Lila like a physical blow. Victoria, who'd welcomed her into the family with careful grace, who'd helped plan her wedding, who'd expressed hope for future grandchildren, she'd known all along. "Tell me what happened," Lila said quietly. Maria's hands clenched and unclenched on the table. "It was after hours. I was finishing transcripts in the courthouse. He said he needed to review some testimony, asked me to stay late, said it was important for a case." She took a shuddering breath. "I was so young, so eager to please. I thought it was professional." Lila waited, not pushing, letting Maria find her own pace.
He cornered me in the transcription room, said I was special, that he'd been watching me. When I tried to leave, he was so much bigger than me, so much more powerful. I kept thinking about all the cases I'd transcribed, all the rapists and abusers who'd walked free from his courtroom. I knew exactly how this would go.
You fought back.
I tried. I managed to get away, ran home, called the police, filed a formal complaint the next day. Maria's laugh was bitter. You know what happened? Internal Affairs said there wasn't enough evidence. The officer who took my statement suggested I might have misunderstood the judge's intentions.
But you didn't give up.
No. I filed a formal complaint with the state judicial board. That's when things got serious. Maria's voice dropped. Private investigators started following me. My car was vandalized. Someone broke into my apartment. Didn't steal anything, just left things disturbed so I'd know they'd been there. The message was clear.
Lila felt sick. How did they make you stop?
Victoria Whitman invited me to lunch. Very civilized, very proper. She explained that her husband was a pillar of the community, that destroying his reputation would hurt so many people. The charities he supported, the cases he presided over, their family's standing. Maria's eyes were distant, remembering. She offered me $50,000 to withdraw the complaint and leave Atlanta.
You took it?
I was 23, terrified, and broke. My family thought I was crazy for making accusations against such a respected man. Even my own mother suggested I might have misinterpreted what happened. Maria met Lila's eyes. Victoria Whitman made it clear that if I didn't take the money and disappear, things would get much worse for me.
So you left.
Best decision I ever made. I moved to Portland, started over, eventually came back to Georgia, but stayed away from Atlanta until a few years ago. Built a quiet life, never drew attention to myself. Maria's voice cracked slightly. I never reported another crime. Never trusted the system again. But I survived. They sat in the wait of her story, the coffee shop's cheerful noise feeling obscene against the backdrop of such deliberate cruelty. There were others, Maria said finally. I heard rumors over the years. Other women who had encounters with Judge Whitman, other complaints that disappeared. The Whitman family machine is very efficient at protecting their reputation.
Would any of them talk if they knew they weren't alone?
Maria studied Lila's face, seeing something there that gave her hope. Maybe. If they thought someone was finally going to hold him accountable, if they believed the system might actually work this time.
Help me find them.
You understand what you're asking. These people have power, connections, resources. They've spent decades perfecting the art of silencing women like us. They won't hesitate to destroy you. Lila thought about Marcus's betrayal, about Victoria's knowing smiles at family dinners, about her mother's decades of silence and shame.
They've already destroyed me. The question is whether I'm going to let them keep destroying others. Maria was quiet for a long moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. There's a woman named Jennifer Walsh. She was a paralegal in the district attorney's office in 1995. Last I heard, she was living in Marietta, running a small law practice. She wrote down an address. And Sarah Chan. She was a victim advocate who worked with the court system in the early 2000s. If anyone would know about other cases, it would be her. Lila took the paper, feeling the weight of responsibility. These weren't just names. They were women whose lives had been shattered, who'd been forced into silence to protect a predator's reputation. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see if we can actually make this bastard pay for what he's done." As they left the coffee shop, Maria paused at the door. "Your mother, Carmen. Is she still alive?" "Yes." "When this is over, win or lose, tell her that Maria Santos remembers her. Tell her she wasn't alone." The Atlanta Police Department's downtown precinct buzzed with controlled chaos, phones ringing, officers shuffling between desks, the constant hum of a system grinding through the city's daily crimes. Detective Maya Patel looked up from her computer as Lila approached, her dark eyes immediately assessing, cataloging details with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 15 years reading people's stories in their body language. "Ms. Rivera, I'm Detective Patel." Maya's handshake was firm, professional. "Your friend Elena said you had information about ongoing criminal activity?" Lila had rehearsed this moment during the sleepless nights since Maria's revelations, but sitting across from Maya in the sterile interview room, she felt unprepared for the weight of what she was about to unleash. "I need to report a pattern of sexual assault spanning 30 years, Lila began, her voice steadier than she felt. "The perpetrator is Judge Robert Whitman." Maya's expression didn't change, but Lila caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "That's a serious accusation against a sitting judge." "I know." Lila placed her folder on the table between them. "I have evidence." For the next hour, Lila laid out everything. The DNA results proving her biological connection to Robert, Marcus's confession about family secrets, Maria Santos's testimony, the pattern of dismissed cases and suspicious donations. Maya listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes, her face revealing nothing. When Lila finished, Maya leaned back in her chair. "You understand the complexity of what you're alleging. Judge Robert Whitman has been on the bench for 30 years. He's presided over thousands of cases, many involving powerful people who would have strong interests in protecting their secrets. Are you saying you won't investigate?" "I'm saying I want you to understand what you're walking into." Maya pulled out a thin file folder. "Judge Robert Whitman isn't unknown to this department." Lila's heart stopped. "You've investigated him before?" "Informally. 3 separate complaints filed over the past decade, all mysteriously withdrawn before formal charges could be filed." Maya opened the folder, revealing a sparse collection of documents. 2 paralegal assistants and a court clerk, all claiming inappropriate behavior, all suddenly deciding they'd misunderstood the situation. What happened to the complaints? Officially, closed, due to lack of evidence and complainant withdrawal. Maya's tone carried the weight of institutional frustration. Unofficially, the complainants all left their jobs. Some left the state. One of the paralegals received a substantial settlement from an unnamed benefactor for emotional distress. The pattern was depressingly familiar. You think he paid them off? I think powerful men have powerful friends, and those friends have ways of making problems disappear. Maya closed the folder. But your situation is different.
You're not an employee he can intimidate or relocate. You're family. The word family sat bitter in the air between them. That also makes me biased. Any defense attorney will argue I'm a disgruntled daughter-in-law with a grudge. Maybe, but you also have something the other complainants didn't. DNA evidence proving a direct connection, which gives us probable cause to investigate his historical behavior. Maya studied Lila's face. The question is whether you're prepared for what that investigation might uncover about your own family. I already know my husband chose to protect his father over me. What else could be worse than that? Maya's expression softened slightly. In my experience, family secrets are like cancers. You start cutting into one, you often find the disease has spread much further than anyone imagined. She opened her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. Before we proceed, you need to understand the realities. Judge Whitman has connections throughout the legal system. Prosecutors he's worked with, defense attorneys who appear before his bench regularly, politicians who owe him favors. Any investigation into his conduct will face institutional resistance. Are you trying to talk me out of this? I'm trying to make sure you understand the cost. Maya pulled up another file. I've been building cases against powerful predators for 7 years. It's slow work, dangerous work. These men don't just destroy their victims, they destroy anyone who threatens their carefully constructed empires. But you keep doing it. Someone has to. Maya's voice carried the weight of personal conviction. I have a daughter, 15 years old. I want her to live in a world where powerful men can't prey on vulnerable women with impunity. Lila felt something shift in the room's dynamic. This wasn't just professional obligation. This was personal mission. 3 years ago, I had a case involving a prominent businessman. 6 women came forward with credible allegations spanning 2 decades. By the time we were ready to file charges, 4 of the women had recanted their testimony. The other 2 were found to have credibility issues. Suddenly, their employment history showed firings for theft. Their financial records revealed suspicious transactions.
What happened?
The case fell apart. The businessman's reputation remained intact. 2 of the women who recanted ended up leaving Georgia entirely. One of the women who maintained her testimony was found dead 6 months later, ruled a suicide, but
Maya's jaw tightened.
let's just say I had questions about the ruling.
The implications sent a chill through Lila. You think he had her killed?
I think men with enough power and resources will do whatever it takes to protect themselves. And I think the system is designed to protect them.
Maya leaned forward.
But I also think every predator eventually makes a mistake, gets overconfident, leaves evidence they can't destroy or explain away.
You think Robert Whitman has made that mistake?
I think a man who's been committing sexual assault for 30 years while building a public reputation as a champion of justice has gotten very comfortable with his invincibility. That kind of comfort makes people careless.
Maya pulled out a fresh notepad.
If we're going to do this, we need to be methodical. We need multiple witnesses, corroborating evidence, and ironclad documentation of every step. These aren't people who'll go down quietly.
What do you need from me?
Everything. Every name Maria Santos gave you, every connection you can make to other potential victims, every detail about the family's behavior that might indicate knowledge of Robert's actions.
Maya's eyes hardened.
And you need to understand that once we start this process, there's no going back. Your marriage is over, your relationship with the Whitman family is finished, and your life in Atlanta will never be the same.
Lila thought about the empty house waiting for her, about Marcus's betrayal, about her mother's decades of silence.
My life already isn't the same. The question is whether I'm going to let his next victim suffer in silence like all the others did. All right. Maya stood, extending her hand again.
Let's build a case against Robert Whitman.
As they shook hands, Lila felt the weight of commitment settle over her. She was no longer just Robert Whitman's unknown daughter or Marcus's estranged wife. She was a witness, an ally to the women who'd been silenced, and potentially the catalyst for justice that had been denied for 30 years. But as she left the police station, walking into the humid Atlanta afternoon, she couldn't shake Maya's warning about powerful men and their willingness to destroy anyone who threatened them.
The Whitman family had spent 30 years perfecting the art of making problems disappear. Now Lila had to hope the system Meyer represented was stronger than the network of influence and intimidation the Whitmans had built to protect their darkest secrets. The transitional housing facility in East Atlanta looked like every other converted apartment complex that housed society's forgotten. Peeling paint, broken security gates, and the resigned atmosphere of people who'd learned not to expect much from life. Lila sat in her car outside Unit 2B, gathering courage for a conversation that would either provide crucial evidence or shatter an 18-year-old's already fragmented world. Tyler Brooks answered the door on the third knock, wariness immediately clouding his features. He was tall and lean, with the sharp bone structure that she now recognized as distinctly Whitman. The same jawline Marcus carried, the same deep-set eyes that stared back at her from family photos. But where Marcus's features spoke of privilege and comfort, Tyler's held the hard edges of someone who'd learned survival too early. "You the lady from social services?" His voice carried the practiced suspicion of someone who dealt with too many well-meaning professionals promising help that never materialized. "No, I'm—" Lila hesitated, then decided on truth. "I think we might be related." Tyler's expression shifted from wariness to confusion. "Lady, I don't have family. Been in the system since I was 7. My name is Lila Rivera. I have reason to believe we share the same biological father." Something flickered in Tyler's eyes. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. He stepped back, allowing her into the sparse studio apartment that held his entire life. A twin bed, a small table with 2 chairs, boxes that looked like they'd never been fully unpacked. "You're gonna have to explain that," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Lila sat down, pulling out the folder she'd assembled: DNA results, family photos, court records. "Have you ever heard the name Robert Whitman?" Tyler went very still. "Why? Do you know that name?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that reminded her uncomfortably of Marcus's during their early courtship. That same analytical assessment, the same careful weighing of trust. "My mom used to have nightmares. She'd wake up screaming about a man in a black robe, called him the judge when she was really strung out. I always thought it was just the drugs talking." Lila's heart clenched. "What was your mother's name?" "Jessica Brooks. Died when I was 16. Overdose. Been on my own since then, aged out of foster care last year." She opened her folder, showing him the DNA results that had destroyed her world. "I took an ancestry test and discovered some unexpected family connections. With your permission, I'd like to help you take one too." Tyler studied the documents, his finger tracing the genetic matches. "You think this Robert Whitman is my father too?" "I think he might have hurt your mother the same way he hurt mine." The words hung between them, weighted with implications Tyler was clearly working through. "Your mother, what happened to her?" "She was 19, volunteering at legal aid events. She never talked about what happened, but she raised me alone, always seemed afraid of something." Lila pulled out one of the few photos she had of her mother from that time. "Does she look familiar?" Tyler stared at the photo, something shifting in his expression. Mom had a picture hidden in her jewelry box. Woman who looked kinda like this, standing next to Mom at some kind of party or event. "I found it after she died, never knew who it was." He disappeared into the small closet, returning with the shoebox. Inside, beneath layers of his mother's meager possessions, was a faded photograph. 2 young women at what looked like a charity event, both wearing volunteer name tags, both smiling with the optimism of people who believed they could make a difference. "That's my mother," Lila whispered, pointing to the woman on the left. "And that's mine." Tyler's voice cracked slightly. They knew each other. They sat in silence, 2 strangers suddenly connected by shared trauma, spanning generations. Finally, Tyler spoke. "Mom never told me who my father was. When I was little, I used to make up stories about him. Maybe he was a soldier who died in war, or a doctor who was too busy saving lives to visit. As I got older, especially when she was using, I figured he was probably some John who didn't know I existed. Tyler, I need to ask you something difficult. Did your mother ever mention being assaulted? Ever talk about someone in power hurting her? His laugh was bitter. My mom was a drug addict who died alone in a crack house. Nobody ever believed anything she said. But yeah, when she was really messed up, she'd talk about powerful men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. She'd say the system was rigged to protect them. Tyler pulled out another item from the box, a manila envelope, yellowed with age. She left this for me, said if anything ever happened to her, I should keep it safe. I never understood what she meant. Inside the envelope were documents that made Lila's blood run cold. Hospital records from 1994 showing Jessica Brooks being treated for injuries consistent with sexual assault. A police report that was never followed up on. And photographs, including several of Robert Whitman at various charity events, always circled in red ink in Jessica's handwriting. She documented everything, Lila breathed, for all the good it did her. Tyler's voice was hard. Nobody listened to a junkie's accusations against a respected judge. But they might listen now, especially if we can prove a pattern. Tyler looked at her with the wariness of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to trust easy promises. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help me prove that Robert Whitman is a serial predator who's been protected by his position and wealth for decades. Help me make sure your mother's suffering wasn't for nothing. And what do I get out of it, besides stirring up trouble that'll probably blow back on me? Lila understood his skepticism. He learned early that powerful people made promises they didn't keep, that justice was a luxury the poor couldn't afford. You get the truth about who you are. You get justice for your mother, and you get the chance to make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else. Tyler was quiet for a long time, turning one of the photographs over in his hands. He's really my father? This judge? The DNA will tell us for certain, but based on everything I've seen, yes, I think so. That would make us half-siblings?
He looked at her with new interest. You said you think he hurt your mother, too. Why are you just now looking into this? Lila told him about the DNA test, about discovering her marriage to Marcus was built on an impossible foundation, about the web of lies and cover-ups she'd uncovered. Tyler listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. So, you had a good life, he said when she finished. Nice house, successful career, married into the family that destroyed both our mothers, and now that it's affected you personally, you want to bring him down. The accusation stung because it held truth. You're right, I was living in ignorance while you were suffering the consequences of his actions. I can't change that, but I can try to change what happens next. Tyler stood, walking to the small window that looked out over the parking lot. You know what the worst part is? I always wondered if maybe my father was someone important, someone who might have helped if he'd known about me. Turns out, he probably did know and just didn't give a shit. Help me make him pay for that. When Tyler turned back to her, his eyes held the same determination she'd seen in Maria Santos, the same resolve that was building in her own chest. What do you need me to do? The text message arrived at 6:47 a.m., 3 days after Lila's meeting with Tyler. Join me for lunch today. We need to talk. Victoria Whitman. No pleasantries, no request, a summons disguised as an invitation. The Bacchanalia restaurant on West Paces Ferry Road was Victoria's choice, naturally. Old Atlanta money lunched there, where discretion was as carefully curated as the wine list. Lila arrived 15 minutes early, wanting the advantage of observing Victoria's entrance. She needn't have worried. Victoria Whitman commanded attention the moment she glided through the restaurant's doors. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, understated but expensive jewelry, the kind of refined elegance that money could buy but couldn't teach. Several diners nodded respectfully as she passed, recognizing Atlanta royalty in their midst. "Lila, darling."
Victoria's embrace was practiced, empty of warmth but performed for the watching room. "You look thin. I hope you're taking care of yourself during this difficult time." They were seated at Victoria's usual table, tucked in a corner that afforded privacy while maintaining visibility, perfect for conducting delicate business under the guise of social lunch. "I was sorry to hear about your marital troubles," Victoria continued, settling into her chair with the grace of someone accustomed to being served. "Marcus is staying with us temporarily while you both work through whatever misunderstanding has occurred." "It's not a misunderstanding." Lila's voice was calm, but she felt the weight of eyes from neighboring tables. "Your son lied to me about fundamental aspects of our relationship."
Young marriages face challenges. With proper guidance and discretion, most difficulties can be resolved. Victoria's smile never wavered. "I've been married to Robert for 35 years. I understand how family dynamics can become complicated." The waiter appeared, and Victoria ordered for both of them without consulting Lila, a power play disguised as gracious hostility. When they were alone again, Victoria's demeanor shifted subtly, the maternal concern replaced by something cooler. "I understand you've been conducting some amateur genealogy research," she said, her voice carrying the dangerous quiet of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "How fascinating that must be for you, discovering new family connections." Lila felt a chill that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. "You know about the DNA results?" "Darling, I've known about your parentage since Marcus first brought you home for dinner." Victoria's smile was razor-sharp now. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the background of any woman my son was serious about? Due diligence is simply good sense." The casual admission hit Lila like a physical blow. "You've known for 5 years that I'm Robert's daughter? And you said nothing? You let me marry Marcus knowing we're siblings?" "Half-siblings," Victoria corrected delicately. "And really, given the circumstances of your conception, I hardly think blood relation is the most pressing concern here." "The circumstances of my—" Lila's voice rose before she caught herself, glancing around at the other diners. "Are you referring to your husband raping my mother?" Such ugly language. Victoria's expression remained serene. "Your mother was a willing participant in a brief liaison with my husband. These things happen when young women involve themselves with powerful men they find attractive." The casual dismissal of her mother's trauma made her hands shake with rage. "My mother was 19. Your husband was a prosecutor with authority and influence. That's not a liaison. That's assault." "That's your interpretation. Others might see a young woman who perhaps regretted certain choices and later found it convenient to reframe them as victimization." Victoria sipped her wine with practiced elegance, particularly when financial circumstances became challenging. "My mother never took money from your family, didn't she?" Victoria reached into her purse, withdrawing a manila folder. "Carmen Rivera, recipient of a $20,000 educational scholarship from the Whitman Foundation in 1990, used to complete her nursing degree at Emory University." Lila stared at the documents, her mother's signature on forms she'd never seen before. "This proves nothing except that your family bought her silence." "It proves your mother accepted financial assistance from people she now claims destroyed her life. One might question her credibility, given such contradictory behavior." The manipulation was masterful, taking her mother's desperate need for education, for a better life for her daughter, and weaponizing it against her character. Lila understood now how the Whitman family had operated for decades, turning victims' survival instincts against them. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I want my family protected from malicious accusations based on 30-year-old misunderstandings." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "I want my son's marriage restored and my husband's reputation preserved. In return, I'm prepared to be generous." She slid another document across the table. "A consulting contract with Whitman Holdings.
$200,000 annually for 5 years, plus benefits. All you need to do is publicly acknowledge that your recent discoveries have been emotionally difficult, that you may have misinterpreted certain family dynamics, and that you're seeking counseling to work through these personal challenges. You want me to discredit myself publicly? I want you to accept reality. Robert Whitman has served this community for 30 years. He's presided over thousands of cases, supported countless charities, built institutions that help vulnerable people. Are you really going to destroy all of that good work based on decade-old accusations from troubled women? Troubled women like Tyler Brooks's mother? Victoria's composure slipped slightly. I'm sorry, who? Jessica Brooks. Another woman your husband assaulted. Another life your family destroyed. Lila watched Victoria's face carefully. Did you pay her off too, or did you just let her destroy herself with drugs? I have no idea what you're talking about. But Lila caught the micro-expression, the brief tightening around her eyes that suggested otherwise. Tyler is 18 now. He has his mother's documentation, her photographs, her hospital records. He's ready to testify. The desperate accusations of a dead drug addict are hardly credible evidence.
How about Maria Santos, Jennifer Walsh, Sarah Chen? How many women did your family silence over the years? Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying Lila with new calculation. You've been busy. I've been seeking truth. Truth is a luxury, darling. Justice is a beautiful ideal, but reality is messier. Victoria's voice carried the weight of hard experience. I came from nothing, Lila. Grew up in a trailer park in South Georgia, married Robert when he was a struggling young prosecutor because I saw opportunity for a better life. For 35 years, I've built something beautiful. Family, community standing, charitable work that has genuinely helped people. Built on a foundation of covering up sexual assault? Built on understanding that powerful men have weaknesses and that wives have choices about how to handle those weaknesses. Victoria's mask had slipped entirely now, revealing something harder underneath. I chose to protect what we'd built, rather than destroy it over Robert's occasional lapses in judgment. Occasional lapses? Lila's voice was incredulous. He's a serial predator. He's a man with appetites who sometimes exercises poor judgment about boundaries. I've managed the consequences of that for decades. Victoria reached across the table, her manicured hand covering Lila's. I'm offering you the same partnership I've maintained. Protection, prosperity, and the security that comes from being inside our family rather than outside it as an enemy. Lila pulled her hand away. And if I refuse? Victoria's smile returned, cold and practiced. Then you'll discover how difficult life can become for people who make accusations they can't prove against families with resources and influence. Your career, your reputation, your financial stability, all of it becomes very fragile very quickly. The threat was delivered with such casual elegance that it took Lila a moment to fully process the implications. You're threatening me. I'm educating you about consequences. Choose wisely, Lila. You have 48 hours to consider my offer. Victoria stood gracefully, leaving money on the table for a lunch Lila couldn't have eaten anyway. As she glided toward the exit, she paused beside Lila's chair. Oh, and darling.
Brooks, dying alone with her shame. Of her own mother, taking money to stay quiet and build a different life. Throughout my career, I've been blessed with a family that understands the weight of public service. Robert's voice grew warmer as his gaze found Victoria at the family table. My wife, Victoria, whose grace and wisdom have been my anchor. My sons, who've learned that with privilege comes responsibility. Marcus sat rigidly beside Lila, his face a mask of filial pride that couldn't quite hide his inner turmoil. Did he believe his father's words, or was he simply playing his assigned role in the family theater? And I'm especially grateful for the newest member of our family, my daughter-in-law, Lila, who reminds us daily that the next generation will carry forward our commitment to justice. The camera found her face, projecting it onto screens around the ballroom. Lila felt hundreds of eyes on her, the weight of expectation and assumption. She was supposed to smile graciously, to play the devoted daughter-in-law proud of her distinguished father-in-law. Instead, she stood. The movement sent ripples through the ballroom, conversations faltering as attention shifted to the young woman rising during the keynote address. Robert paused mid-sentence, his politician's instincts alerting him to disruption. "Judge Whitman?" Lila's voice carried clearly in the sudden quiet. "I have a question about your commitment to justice." Security guards moved toward her table, but she was already walking toward the podium, her steps measured and deliberate. Victoria's face had gone white. Marcus was half rising from his chair, but Lila's focus remained fixed on the man who had destroyed so many lives while building his reputation as their protector. "What about justice for Maria Santos?" Lila's voice strengthened as she reached the front of the room. "The court reporter you assaulted in 1992? The ballroom erupted. Gasps, shocked murmurs, the scrape of chairs as people turned to better see the drama unfolding. Robert's composed facade cracked slightly, his eyes darting toward security, toward Victoria, toward escape routes. "What about Jessica Brooks?" Lila continued, pulling out Tyler's mother's photograph. "The young woman whose assault you covered up, who died of an overdose rather than live with what you did to her." "Security!" Victoria's voice cut through the chaos, but Lila was already at the podium microphone. "What about my mother, Carmen Rivera?" The words echoed through the ballroom sound system. "What about the 19-year-old volunteer you raped 35 years ago?" The reaction was immediate and volcanic. Some guests rose in outrage at the accusations, others in shock at their public nature. Cell phones appeared, recording the destruction of one of Atlanta's most respected families in real time. Robert stepped back from the podium, his face cycling through emotions. Shock, anger, calculation. "This woman is clearly disturbed," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades on the bench. "She's my son's estranged wife, obviously distraught over her marital problems." "I'm your daughter." Lila's voice cut through his dismissal like a blade. "DNA proves it. You raped my mother, abandoned her, and then watched me marry your son without saying a word."
The ballroom fell into stunned silence. Even the servers had stopped moving, frozen by the magnitude of the accusation. Victoria was pushing through the crowd toward the stage, her face a mask of fury and desperation. "You built your career protecting predators like yourself," Lila continued, her voice steadier than her racing heart. "You silenced your victims with money and threats while accepting awards for protecting the vulnerable." Robert tried to regain control of the narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is clearly a deeply troubled individual. Detective Maya Patel, Atlanta Police Department." Maya's voice rang out from near the ballroom entrance. "Judge Robert Whitman, you're under arrest for sexual assault." The room exploded into chaos as uniformed officers moved through the crowd. Cameras flashed, guests scrambled for exits, and the carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbled in real time. Marcus reached Lila's side, his face stricken. "How could you do this, here, in front of everyone?" "Because everywhere else, your family makes the truth disappear." Lila watched as officers approached Robert, who was backing away from the podium with the look of a man whose world was disintegrating. Because Maria Santos and Jessica Brooks and all the others deserved better than silence. Victoria reached them, her elegant composure completely shattered. "You stupid girl, you have no idea what you've just destroyed." "I know exactly what I've destroyed," Lila replied, watching as handcuffs clicked around Robert Whitman's wrists. 30 years of lies. As they led her father away, past the shocked faces of Atlanta's elite, Lila felt something she hadn't experienced since learning the truth about her marriage, a sense of clean purpose. The comfortable lies were finally over. 3 weeks after the gala, Lila's suburban house felt like a museum of her former life. The coffee stain on the hardwood floor remained where she'd first learned the truth, a permanent reminder of the moment her world shattered. She stood at the kitchen window, watching news vans finally departing after days of constant surveillance, their crews moving on to fresher scandals now that the initial shock of the Whitman arrest had given way to legal proceedings. Her phone buzzed constantly. Reporters, lawyers, advocacy groups, curiosity seekers who'd somehow obtained her number. She'd stopped answering calls from unknown numbers, letting her voicemail fill with requests for interviews about bringing down one of Atlanta's most powerful families. The attention made her skin crawl, but it also meant Robert's crimes couldn't be buried this time. The doorbell rang, and through the peephole she saw Elena holding coffee and wearing the determined expression of someone prepared for difficult conversation. They'd spoken several times since the arrest, but Elena's social worker instincts kept checking in, monitoring for signs that Lila was drowning in the aftermath of her choices. "How are you holding up?" Elena asked, settling into the same kitchen chair where they'd first planned their investigation. "Depends on the hour." Lila accepted the coffee gratefully. "This morning, I felt vindicated, watching Channel 5's report about 3 more women coming forward. This afternoon, I felt like a fraud when Marcus's sister called me a family-destroying bitch and hung up. Andrea always was dramatic. What did you expect from Robert's daughter?" The casual reference to family relationships still jarred Lila. Andrea was her half-sister. Marcus was her half-brother. The man who'd raised her husband was also her biological father. The genetic counselor she'd consulted had used clinical terms like complex family dynamics and unusual circumstances, but nothing prepared someone for the reality of living inside a psychological thriller. Detective Patel called this morning. 4 women have now officially filed complaints. The DA's office is treating this as a serial case spanning 30 years. That's good news. Is it? Lila stared out the window at the neighborhood where she'd once felt safe. Maria Santos is getting death threats from people who think she's a gold digger destroying a good man. Tyler Brooks was evicted from his transitional housing because the facility got pressure from donors. These women are suffering new trauma because they trusted me to make this right. Elena reached across the table, covering Lila's hand with hers. You gave them something they'd never had before, the chance to be believed. That's not nothing. Tell that to Jessica Brooks. Oh, wait, you can't. She's dead. Lila! Elena's voice carried the firm compassion of someone who'd guided many trauma survivors through guilt and self-blame. Jessica's death isn't your fault. Robert Whitman's crimes aren't your fault. The system that protected him for 30 years isn't your fault. The words were logical, but logic had little power against the weight of consequences Lila carried. Every news report about the Whitman family's fall felt personal. Every interview with shocked community members who'd trusted Robert's public image reminded her that she'd been the one to detonate their world. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. Another message from the divorce attorney. Updates on the property division that had become complicated by Robert's arrest and the family's financial accounts being frozen during the investigation. Marcus wanted the house, their house, claiming emotional attachment to the place where they'd built their marriage. Lila wanted to burn it down. Have you talked to him? Elena asked, reading her expression. Marcus? Once. He came by last week to get more clothes. Lila remembered the encounter. Marcus standing in their bedroom doorway looking lost, as if he couldn't understand how they'd arrived at such devastation. He asked if I was happy now that I'd destroyed his family. What did you tell him? That I wasn't the one who destroyed anything. I just refused to keep helping hide the destruction. She pulled up the email from her attorney.
He's contesting the divorce, claiming temporary insanity brought on by trauma. His lawyers are arguing that discovering her parentage caused a psychological break that impaired my judgment. Elena's expression darkened. They're trying to discredit you. Of course they are. It's the family playbook. If you can't silence the victim, destroy her credibility. Lila scrolled through other legal documents. Victoria's lawyers are claiming I manipulated vulnerable women into making false accusations against Robert. They're suggesting I coached Maria Santos and Tyler Brooks, used my marketing skills to manufacture a conspiracy. Can they make that stick? Depends on how good their lawyers are and how much the jury believes that an entire family could keep such secrets for so long. Lila closed the laptop, suddenly exhausted. Sometimes I wonder if I should have taken Victoria's offer. $200,000 and a quiet life versus this constant battle. But you'd be protecting a predator. And I'd be protecting myself, and Maria, and Tyler, and all the women who'll have to testify now and relive their worst moments in public. She gestured at the stack of newspapers on her counter, headlines screaming about Atlanta's most shocking scandal. Look what I've done to them! Elena was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Last week, I got a call from a woman named Jennifer Walsh. Remember that name? Maria mentioned her, paralegal from the 90s. She saw the news coverage and decided to come forward. For 25 years, she's carried the shame of what Robert did to her, convinced she was the only one, convinced no one would believe her. Elena's voice softened. She said watching you stand up at that gala gave her permission to finally speak her truth. The revelation hit Lila like a physical blow. Another victim? Another survivor who's finally free to heal because of your courage. They sat in silence, watching the late afternoon sun slant through windows that needed cleaning. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories from a life that had been built on lies. But it was hers now, in a way it had never been when she'd shared it with Marcus and his family secrets. I've been thinking about Tyler, Lila said finally. He's brilliant, you know, scored high enough on his SATs to get into Georgia Tech, but he can't afford it. No family support, no resources, just raw intelligence and determination. Are you thinking of helping him? I'm thinking he shouldn't have to pay for his father's crimes.
In the defendant's chair, Robert Whitman sat motionless, his once commanding presence diminished by orange jail scrubs and the weight of evidence accumulated against him. The defense had fought every piece of testimony, every document, every witness, with the desperation of lawyers defending the indefensible. They'd painted Lila as a troubled woman seeking revenge against her in-laws, suggested the other victims were motivated by money, claimed that consensual encounters had been retroactively redefined as assault. But their arguments crumbled against the methodical presentation of pattern evidence spanning decades. And what was your husband's reaction when you confronted him with these results? Chen continued. He admitted he'd suspected our relationship might be problematic. He'd taken his own DNA test weeks earlier and hidden the results from me. Lila's gaze briefly found Marcus in the gallery, sitting with his remaining family. He looked older, hollowed out by months of scrutiny, and the collapse of everything he believed about his father. The DNA evidence had been devastating. But it was the victim testimony that had truly destroyed Robert's defense. Marie Santos had taken the stand with quiet dignity, describing her assault and the systematic campaign that had driven her from Atlanta. Jennifer Walsh had followed, detailing similar patterns of predatory behavior and institutional cover-up. Tyler Brooks, now 18 and surprisingly composed, had testified about his mother's documentation and the Whitman family's callous abandonment of their victims' children. Ms. Rivera, the defense attorney, rose for cross-examination, his tone dripping with practiced sympathy. You've admitted to experiencing significant emotional trauma from these discoveries. Isn't it possible that your interpretation of events has been colored by your psychological state? My psychological state doesn't alter DNA evidence. It doesn't change hospital records from 1994 or police reports from 1992. It doesn't create decades of financial payments to women's organizations that just happen to serve my father's victims. The trial had revealed the full scope of the Whitman family's operation, not just Robert's crimes, but the sophisticated network of enablers who'd protected him. Victoria faced her own charges for obstruction of justice and witness intimidation. Several attorneys and investigators who'd helped silence victims had been sanctioned or suspended. The charitable foundation that had served as money laundering operation for hush payments was being dismantled. The prosecution rests, Your Honor. As the trial moved to closing arguments, Lila reflected on the 6-month journey from that first devastating DNA revelation to this moment of potential justice. The personal costs had been enormous. Her marriage dissolved, her privacy destroyed, her sense of identity rebuilt from scratch. But sitting in that courtroom, surrounded by women who'd finally found their voices, she understood that some prices were worth paying. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, multiple charges of sexual assault, conspiracy, and abuse of power, the courtroom erupted in a chaos of tears, cheers, and shouted questions from reporters. Robert Whitman, who'd presided over this same courthouse for years, was led away in handcuffs to begin a sentence that would likely end his life in prison. Later, outside the courthouse steps, Lila faced the media one final time. The cameras and microphones that had haunted her for months now served a different purpose, amplifying a message of hope for other survivors. This conviction isn't just about Robert Whitman. It's about dismantling systems that protect predators and silence victims. It's about proving that power and position don't place anyone above accountability. Behind her, Maria Santos and Tyler Brooks stood with other survivors, their presence a testament to the courage required to speak truth to power. Elena Vasquez smiled from the crowd, her social worker's heart satisfied by seeing justice finally served. The Rivera Foundation for Survivor Justice officially launches next month. Will provide legal support, counseling services, and educational assistance for victims of institutional sexual violence and their families. Because healing requires more than courtroom victories. It requires rebuilding lives that powerful people tried to destroy. As the press conference ended, Tyler approached her with the acceptance letter he'd received that morning. Georgia Tech, full scholarship, pre-law program. His mother's dreams for him finally realized despite everything the Whitman family had taken from them. She would have been proud, he said, referring to Jessica Brooks. She would have been proud of both of us, Lila replied.
He deserves the chance at education and stability that Robert's actions took away from him. She pulled out another folder. Scholarship applications, financial aid forms, letters of recommendation she'd been quietly assembling. I want to establish a foundation. Using my divorce settlement, maybe some of the book and interview money that keeps getting offered. Elena smiled, the first genuine warmth Lila had seen from her in weeks. What kind of foundation? Support for survivors of sexual assault by people in power, legal assistance, counseling, education funding for their children. The idea had been growing in her mind, a way to transform the destruction into something constructive. I can't undo the damage Robert caused, but maybe I can help people rebuild from it. That's beautiful, Lila. It's practical. These women, we need resources to fight back against systems designed to protect predators. She thought about Maria Santos, still looking over her shoulder 25 years later, about Tyler Brooks, aging out of foster care with nothing but his mother's documentation of trauma, about her own mother, who'd taken Whitman money for education and carried the shame ever since. The trial starts in 2 months, Elena said. Are you ready? I'll never be ready, but I'll be there. Lila looked around the kitchen where she'd discovered the truth that changed everything. I owe it to all the women who came before me and all the ones who might come after if we don't stop him. As Elena left, Lila remained at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents and foundation paperwork, building something new from the wreckage of her former life. Outside, Atlanta's evening rush hour began, normal people heading home to normal families with normal problems. Inside, a woman who'd lost everything she thought she wanted, worked to create something she'd never known she needed, a way to transform survival into justice, and justice into hope. 6 months after the arrest, Lila sat in the witness chair of the Fulton County Superior Court, her hands steady as she held the DNA report that had started everything. The courtroom was packed. Media, advocates, curious observers drawn to Atlanta's trial of the decade. But her focus remained on the 12 jurors who would decide whether 3 decades of carefully hidden crimes would finally face consequences. Ms. Rivera, the prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen, approached with the confident stride of someone who'd built an ironclad case. Please tell the court how you discovered your biological relationship to the defendant. Lila's voice was clear as she recounted the story that had destroyed and rebuilt her life. The casual DNA test, the impossible results, the web of lies that unraveled with each new revelation.